So, I want to take you back about 20 years. The year is 1999 and Microsoft's latest major operating system is Windows 98. Many businesses and homes had PCs running 98, including mine. Around that time, my dad picked up a Dell Dimension PC for our home. My siblings and I played plenty of CD-ROM games on it, and we would also briefly use it to access the internet through a dial-up modem. Our provider was NetZero, a company that, I am surprised to learn, is still active today. I was 4 years old at the time, and this was my first experience with computers, let alone the internet. Playing Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network Flash games were just about all that a 4-year-old child would want to do on the internet at that time. That was fun until our free trial of internet access ran out. I actually remember the exact moment when the service ran out, as I was in the middle of using it. We would not sign up for service again until 2004, when we got our new PC that had Windows XP. For the remainder of its days, the old Dell Dimension would never again get online. Eventually, after years of obsolescence, we junked the Dimension, along with all its accessories, and moved on to newer PCs. But of course, you never forget your first. What you're looking at here is a Dimension that is visually identical to the one we had. However, internally, it is a bit different. It has mostly modern parts and runs an install of Windows 10. Unfortunately, the case is rather disgusting, and several attempts at cleaning it have not been successful. So we're going to disassemble the PC and put the parts into a new case. What a horrendous mess of wires. I know we can do better than this. Let's take out all the parts and see what it has. Removing the drives gave me a little bit of trouble. I didn't see any screws on the side panel holding them in place, nor did squeezing these tabs do anything. But eventually, I figured it out. The DVD drive was a bit more stubborn, but with a little bit of force, that one came right out too. The SSD was also being held in place with a single screw, so that came right out. All that remains in here is the power switch and the floppy drive. We'll worry about those later. Now, by no means is this a high-end machine. The Dimension line itself was designed for home or business use. The parts here vary in age and power, but together you'll be able to have a standard, basic use PC. The motherboard is an Asus B150MK with an LGA 1151 socket. Installed is a dual-core 3.5 GHz Pentium CPU. For RAM, we've got 8 GB of DDR4 memory. We've also got a 500-watt power supply. Completely overkill for this unit, but we'll take it. The 2.5-inch solid-state drive is a 250GB Samsung model from 2017. By far the oldest component here is the graphics card. This ATI Radeon HD 4800 series is from 2008 and features 2 DVI outputs. It also has an S-Video output if you have a CRT television you'd like to connect it to. It has 500 megabytes of dedicated video memory. Certainly not going to be part of your gaming rig these days, but it's more than enough for our purposes. Maybe we'll make some use of that power supply and upgrade this later. This PCI Express card adds 4 USB 3.0 ports to the back of the unit. Additionally, we've got a memory card reader with a front USB 3.0 port and a DVD rewritable drive. Finding a beige 90s looking DVD drive that connects over SATA was surprisingly easy. Now, let's remove the power switch and the floppy drive. We'll set those aside for the time being. And it's done! The mutilated skeleton of the Dimension L866R sits before you menacingly. Now we'll shift focus over to the new case. This empty Dimension L933R case was given to me by a friend from school. Thanks, Alex. I've never received a more oddly specific, yet extremely useful gift. It's in great shape, save for the jammed power switch. We'll take care of that. And now it's time to rebuild the PC. First, we're going to remove the casing and the IDE CD drive. Don't really have any use for that these days. That jammed power switch has also got to go. We'll be reusing the one from the other case, as it's already been wired with an adapter to work with our motherboard. Seating the motherboard is fairly straightforward, but unfortunately there are no screw holes on the case to hold it in place. Instead, there are just these clips, which are not very effective. The other components, particularly the PCI Express cards, will be vital to keeping the motherboard stationary. We'll connect the fan and graphics card to the board. The graphics card needs to connect to both the power supply and the PCI Express slot. We'll also fill in the empty PCI Express space with the dust cover bracket. After that, we'll install the drives. We'll remove the cover here to install the memory card reader. The floppy drive will also go in here, but only for show. It won't be functional. These drives won't be a problem. However, the SSD needs to be mounted. Some of these cases have different drive brackets. I ran into a little trouble with this one, as the case was initially designed with a 3.5-inch hard disk in mind. The drive was scratched up a bit in the process, but I did manage to install it. As I'm connecting cables to the motherboard, I'm trying to keep cable management as clean as possible. Running them through here helps. I need to remember to connect every drive. Once that's done, it's time to connect the power supply. The spider web of cables coming out of the unit might be daunting at first, but we won't be using all of them. After dusting off the fan, we'll mount the power supply in the case and start running wires. We can wrap some of them up with twisty ties to consolidate them. Ideally, we'd want to make use of this space behind the optical drive for excess cable storage. After connecting the power supply to the board, we'll run it into the back of the graphics card. Once all necessary power cables are connected, we'll pop the power supply bay into place. And we're almost done, but we still have to connect the power switch. This requires connecting some specific pins into place, so I used a guide I found online to check the connections. Once that's done, we're ready to test the unit and see if it powers on. And there you have it! Now it's time to put the plastic covers back on and get this thing looking presentable. Fantastic! But we can do better. Using a magic eraser will get quite a few of these imperfections out. We want this thing looking great. Unfortunately, it looks like I scrubbed off some of the blue finish on the Dell logo. Don't make the same mistake I did. But overall, it's looking so much better. This project went really well. Now I think it's time to hook it up for real. But, well, I don't know about you, but this setup is just not doing it for me. 2 monitors, wireless devices. Those speakers also look pretty nice. I think we should be using something a little more period accurate, don't you think? I mean, really, who had an LCD monitor back then? Now that's much better. This keyboard, speaker, and monitor setup is identical to the one we had 20 years ago. The monitor is connected to the DVI output with a VGA adapter. My initial goal was to get Windows 7 installed on here, and to use the Windows Classic theme to make it resemble Windows 98 as closely as possible. After waiting through the install process, I unfortunately ran into some driver issues. It was quite unhappy with my choice of Wi-Fi adapter, and it also had some cursor issues with each mouse I tried using. And even then, there is also the fact that Windows 7 will no longer be supported by Microsoft in less than a month. that wouldn't give us very much time to enjoy this system. So the only logical step at that point would be to install a fresh copy of Windows 10 and wait through the install process yet again. This one was much faster since I installed it over USB 3.0. I decided to take a moment during the Windows 7 install to clean the speakers, but I had little success. When the setup finished, Windows 10 was up and running. WinArrow Tweaker allowed for much of the customization that was done here, including a startup sound. Windows 10 unfortunately does not offer a classic theme, but an icon pack combined with classic shell can work wonders. This was the computer that started it all for me, and I'm glad to have brought it into the modern era, albeit while retaining the classic feel. If you were interested in attempting a similar project with a computer you had years ago, do a little bit of research to ensure that the case isn't too proprietary. If the PC you owned did not feature a standard ATX or micro ATX layout, then you're probably going to have a rough time with this. Nonetheless, I enjoyed making this so much that I actually edited the whole video on this machine. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you, and have a great day.